In podcast 54, The Armed Forces Officer.
Remember that book, The Armed Forces Officer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
1950 edition.
Yeah. Can you expound on the difference between these two seemingly contradictory quotes from the manual? A firm hold at the beginning pays tenfold dividend of the timid approach, followed by a show of firmness later on, from General Malone's story of World War I. Compared with...
And General Malone's, if you remember, the story was there was a messed up unit, and he went in there and was like, all right, get squared away, get these boards in place, get out of the mud, what you need to get your uniforms together, just tighten them up out of the gate.
Like firmness right
away. Out of the gate.
Yeah. And then compared to... okay, here's a quote. It's a mistake for an officer on taking a new post to order sweeping changes affecting the other man in the belief that this will give him a reputation for action and firmness. The studying of situations is the overture of the steadying of it. And that's from General LeMay.
And General LeMay, if you remember that one, he said, hey, none of you guys would be in these positions unless you were doing things right. So I assume that you're doing a good job and we're going to continue what you're doing. That's what he said when he took over. Mm-hmm. So what's going on here is you got two completely different situations. And the two situations are, one is a guy taking over for a situation, a known bad situation. The troops are lacking discipline. They're not executing the mission. And if you remember from that story, they weren't even doing basic military bearing. They weren't saluting the officers. They just had thrown everything out the window. That's a situation where you got to come in, you got to get firm out of the gate. That's what you got to do. Now, they got to know that things are going to change. They got to know it's real. They got to know there's a new plan, and they got to know what that new plan is. And then they got to know that there's new standards, and they got to know what the new standards are. Boom. And it's the same thing. Hackworth, he did that. He came in with some, if you remember when he took over the hardcore battalion, what became the hardcore battalion, the first thing he did was like all those radios and guitars and all this crap that you have sitting around base, put it all in the middle of the base tomorrow, and we're getting rid of it all. That was a big change. Now, Hackworth, then he started implementing 2 changes a day, if you remember. Hey, got to get everyone, carry your weapon at all times. That's the next change. Okay, get your helmet. Okay, now we got to get helmet covers on. He just made one or two small changes a day after he made some big sweeping changes out of the gate because it was a jacked up battalion. And now the difference is if you're going into a situation where everything's going fine or okay, or at a bare minimum, it's like normal, well, then you don't need to step in there and show that you're the man by making these sweeping changes. You don't need to do that. It comes across like the people that you just took charge of have no idea what they're doing, and you don't respect their methodology. You don't respect their performance because you're coming in and saying, "Oh, Echo, by the way you record the podcast, you need to get rid of those microphones. You need to edit it tighter. Your bass is too loud." What would you be thinking if I came in and said that?
Well, me a little bit different, but I understand your point.
Point being, if somebody comes in and starts criticizing you,
right, when you're doing okay,
when you're doing a good job, you're doing a good job.
Yeah,
I think you're doing a good job.
Thanks.
There's some people that get on you about that bass occasionally.
Hey man, that's really on you. Your
Talk
bass,
higher?
your bass. Yeah, extreme disownership on my part.
So that's the thing. If that's the decision you got to make, and guess what? It's not black and white. You don't go into some units. It's not like you're going to get a choice between a unit that's doing horrible and a unit that's doing great. You're going to get everything in between. And therefore, you have to modulate your leadership to reflect. If it's a group that might have a tendency of being a little bit jacked up and they're getting close, guess what? Gotta be maybe not sweeping changes, but you might need to make a little statement.
Right.
If it's a group that's performing awesome, fantastic, top team, top whatever, you might need to come and say, hey guys, I see that you're doing great. I'm here to just keep you guys doing what you're doing. Let me know what you need to support. Boom. And it could be anywhere in between that spectrum. That's why leadership is challenging. Because you got to have nuance. You got to be able to modulate.
Yeah.
You got to figure out where that is.
Yeah.
And you got to test it out too. Once you give that sweeping order, you got to see what kind of reaction you got. You got to see, did people just instantly rebel? Okay, then let's talk this. Let's get some feedback. What's going on? Clearly, we have a disrespect scenario going on. We need to get to the bottom of this. Let me get some key leaders in here. Let me talk to them and get some feedback. which you should do that before you make any sweeping changes anyway. You got to at least talk to the key leadership, get them in the game, get them on board.
Yeah.
That's why leadership is awesome. That's why this stuff is so fun, because it's challenging. It's different every single time.
Yeah, it feels like kind of like what we were talking about earlier, where if you start to understand the formula, all the different details that come out, you can kind of apply the formula in one way, and even then, still dynamic. But you can just get a better grasp.
It's
of it.
just like jiu-jitsu. If you understand the concept.
Yeah.
That you have to be able to move your hips. There's a bunch of different ways you can get your hips moving.
Right.
If you understand the concept that you need to immobilize the hips to pass the guard, if you understand that concept, there's all kinds of different ways you can do it. If you understand the concept of totally jacked up team is going to need a sweeping change to get their attention and get them to understand that things are going to change and what they were doing was unacceptable. If you understand that concept, that's what it's going to take, you can apply it all the way through those gradations, all the way down to, hey, this team is doing great and I don't need to change much. I just need to give them the support that they need.
Yeah.
Conceptual instruction. Very important.
Solid.